Good morning and welcome to this week's session in our series of conversations of women of significance in STEM. And this is a series of conversations that I'm having with women around the world who are basically creating success for themselves in spite of the biases, in spite of the barriers, in spite of all the things in the system that are stopping us from having that gender and cultural and racial diversity that we need across all industries. And this focus is in our science and tech industry, because that is the heart of where the innovation needs to come from to solve the big problems in the world. And today we have with us Carol Cox, who is a very multi-talented, multifaceted success story. She has a background in academia, in history, in software design, in both the technical and the arts. And now she is helping women to create or understand their value and bring their value to light in speaking your brand. So welcome today, Carol. So pleased to have you here.
Thank you, Leah. I am very excited to be here, and I'm so glad that you are shining the light on women in STEM and talking about what it will take for us to have even more women not only enter the field, but stay in the field and advance in the STEM fields.
Absolutely, Carol. And this is the thing, there's a lot of initiatives, particularly here in Australia, that are working or shining the light for our girls at school, to encourage them to choose the science and tech subjects and education at university. And you're right, there are two issues, aren't there? There's first having enough in the pool, and then once they're in the pool, how do we keep them in the pool? Because the system there are so many barriers and challenges within that. And so today I'm really keen to understand and to have you share with us some of your perspectives, your learnings, the way you've navigated change in your career, because you've certainly made taken a lot of different forks in the road. So perhaps we could start with you telling us a little bit more about what you do and what problem that solves, and the kind of helicopter view of how you came to be doing this.
Sure, Leo. So my current business is called Speaking Your Brand, and we provide coaching and training for women entrepreneurs and professionals around creating their signature talk, their signature message, whether they want to go speak at conferences, on webinars, do TED Talks, as well as really position themselves as leaders, as thought leaders in their industry and in their community. So we help them find their voice and use their voice so that they can become leaders.
Thank you so much. And this is a theme around the one aspect is being seen. So, and having our profiles up and out, but what I'm seeing is that, yes, step two is definitely we need to then speak what it is that is important to us, and we need to do it in a way that so we are understood. And that's where I think the value is of what you do is so key, because it's not easy just to get up and speak your opinion. But there is a real art to actually first identifying what your message is and then saying it in a way that has impact to the audience to whom you're speaking. And that's where I'm really enjoying these conversations, because clearly this is an art and a science that you have mastered and now teach. So how did you come to be doing this work? What was the inspiration that led you here?
Well, it was definitely a winding road, and I will back up to the more immediate timeline to when Speaking Your Brand started. So I started the company in 2015. It was my third business since about the year 2002. And I had been in technology prior to that. And we can come back to the two technology businesses that I had if you want to talk a little bit more about that. But I really was was tired of code. I really wanted to work with people and not so much with just the computers. I loved programming. I was a software developer, database programmer. I loved doing it because of the sense of accomplishment. You can code something and you can see it happen. You can make something happen, and it provides that sense of achievement. But I got burnt out from it. And we can talk a little bit about kind of like these lessons learned that I learned from doing this to hopefully help some of the women who are watching. But I got burnt out from it and decided that I wanted to start a different type of business where I could use some of these other skills. You mentioned I have a background in history. I went to graduate school for that. I also have a background in politics. So I really wanted to bring some of these other aspects into the work that I did. So I decided to start Speaking Your Brand because I could see that many of my female friends and colleagues, other entrepreneurs that I was with, that they wanted to speak more. They wanted to go to conferences. They want to do keynotes. They wanted to do TED Talks, and they could put together a decent presentation, but it wasn't one that really captured the audience. And I had been speaking since I was in high school on the speech and debate team, all through college and then into my early career even. So I was very good at putting presentations together and delivering them. And people would always comment on that. So I thought, well, I can create this business. And this is another tip for those watching. If you have an idea, just go run with it. There was no magic wand, fairy godmother who say, yes, Carol, you are allowed to start this business, even though I had no quote unquote credentials to start this type of business, but I knew that I could help other people.
Where did that come from? Where did that come from? That's a level of compelling confidence there, Carol. That's what I want to bottle up and be able to, if we could, bottle that, just that, the energy that you gave us there with your absolute conviction that, yep, but what I do here is that you noticed that you were good at something. You took the feedback from your environment. Your environment fed back to you that you were good at putting presentation together, and it's something that gave you joy. So that's that idea of working in our zone of genius, isn't it? That we talk about.
Yes.
So so it is a combination of feedback from environment, but also what gives us joy. But where does your sense of conviction and go for it? You've got an idea, go for it. Where does that come from? Where did you learn that?
It must have been from my childhood. I was always a high achiever, did well in school, always got good grades, always envisioned a great career for myself. And that was really something that I wanted to do. I wanted to do well in. So if I saw an opportunity, then I would take it. And I would raise my hand, or I would join the speech and debate team, or join Model United Nations Club in college and speak at the Model UN conference in New York. So I always had this drive to contribute. I think that's where it comes from, that I wanted to have a voice. I wanted to have a seat at the table and have a voice and contribute, and not just be a passive consumer, not just be a passive intaker of information.
That seat at the table. And in fact, that was something you talked about in your podcast around sponsorship and advocacy. And that is so important. And that was such a vital point. I know that's a bit of a diversion around, if you can't have that seat at the table, who is going to have that? Who is at the table who can advocate on your behalf? But the desire to be at that table is something innate, isn't it? There's got to come from within you. But sometimes it takes someone else to tell you you could actually have that seat at the table. So that person that gives you belief before you've got that belief in yourself. So it sounds like, so you had a fairly nurturing family background. Did you have, tell me a little bit about your, parents. Were they entrepreneurs? Were they go-getters? Or, there must have been something that sort of gave you that permission and that inspired the drive to contribute and the drive to say, yes, I'm good enough and I've got value to add here.
Yes, well, I'm sure my mother would say it was nature. I was kind of born this way of being like kind of this high achiever because I was always like this. But there was definitely a nurture element from my mother. She always encouraged me and my siblings that we could do whatever we wanted to and wanted us to make us very independent and resilient, which we have become. Now, interestingly, both of my sets of grandparents on both sides of my family, my father's parents and my mother's parents, were both entrepreneurs. They both had their own small family businesses, but it was definitely a presence in my life growing up as a child. I knew they ran these businesses. I actually would go, I would help out in the businesses and work there during the summer when I was home from school. And so it was definitely part of my upbringing to know that it was possible to create something out of nothing.
Yeah, the create something from nothing, work ethic, teamwork, have an idea to create something from nothing, and a desire to contribute, and fascinating. So what were your challenges? It sounds like you had a joyride.
No, far from it.
A fairy tale career, born leader and, running and off to a fabulous start. And I mean, and isn't it just such a blessing to have such a wonderful start in life, and to have that environment with so much can-do thinking, can-do encouragement, and the your own desires to be a high achiever. But tell me, there must have been some dark spots there somewhere.
Oh, there certainly were. I mean, there definitely were challenges, and I would say it was myself getting into my own way, and I'm sure there's probably going into therapy, like there's probably some other childhood origins of that. But I would say that I also had a very shy side, which seems very incongruous because I loved public speaking. I loved to be on the debate team, but I was very shy personally with my friend group. I had friends, but I was still very shy with them. And so that kind of showed up in high school and college, and I had to work through some of that. But I think the public speaking, like the performance aspect, gave me a sense that I didn't have for myself when it was just like me. Like I could almost step into a different character, even though I wasn't acting in a play, but I could almost put on this different character as a public speaker than I would just as myself. So yeah, there definitely, were some challenges in there.
And the getting in your own way. So how does that show up?
Yeah, I would. Okay. So and I haven't really talked about this on my podcast yet either. This is interesting. So you're getting the exclusive here, Leah. So when
I feel very privileged, Carol. You just do amazing things for women all over the world. My goodness. So it's a privilege. Please.
So when I was in undergraduate, so at university, and getting ready to kind of finish so I was halfway through, had 2 more years left, and I really wanted to go into the Foreign Service in the United States. The Foreign Service is like our State Department, and the Foreign Service is where you get posted to other countries, so the embassies in other countries around the world. And I really wanted to do that. So I was studying the Foreign Service exam, brushing up on the foreign languages that I had taken during college. But at the moment when I really needed to kind of press go on that option, really go in that direction, I started doubting myself that could I really live overseas in some country that I barely even knew about? And what would I do when I, didn't have people around me that I knew? I didn't have an anchor. And so I decided to kind of to hold on that and not go in that direction. And I ended up going to graduate school because I wanted to be a professor at a university and do that. And so it was a safer choice. Like it felt to me like a safer choice. Now, who knows? I love what I do today. So I believe that whatever path you end up going down, you go down for a reason and it takes you where you need to go. But who knows? That could have been a really interesting career as well.
So that was one of those forks in the road, which now, as you reflect back, it sounds like the self-doubt, voice won on that occasion. Yeah.
Yes.
But what I'm also hearing is that you didn't just have one you know, one stoke in the fire. You know, you had another path that was equally as exciting for you. And as you say, and what I'm hearing is it is that attitude of like, of there's opportunity in everything we do. And that we can, you know, and when we think that way, we find things that inspire us as well. And, you know, and this is where, what's that saying that discipline is, there's something about discipline and regret. Discipline is temporary, regret is permanent. Or, you know, there's nothing worse than living with regret. And this is something that I'm hearing in you as well, Carol, is that you are very much a seize the day, seize the opportunity, and go for it. And so I guess when you see, and particularly working in politics, and you know, you've been a political analyst, and you know, these are very male dominated environments. You know, tell me, you know, did you have challenges with it? How did you kind of operate? If I'm hearing too, you were on a personal level quite shy about you, or maybe just more quieter about your personal beliefs and your personal stuff, but you're quite confident in talking about the thing, the topic, the debate, the you know, the political situation. But how did you I guess, what was your experience in these male dominated environments?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, Lee. And I've thought quite a bit about this because people have asked me this before. And I am a self-described feminist. I've called myself a feminist since I was a teenager, and probably first like kind of studied it and realized that, oh yes, that's what I am. And I feel like I always showed up as Carol. I never showed up as a woman in a particular situation. So maybe this goes back to that confidence, that just an innate confidence that I had. So I knew that I belonged there, and I showed up as Carol, ready to contribute my ideas and my talents to wherever I was. So whether it was graduate school in history, going into technology, again, very male dominated, all the organizations I volunteer or belonged to, all the companies that I worked with, going into politics. And I never had a particular situation that happened, at least none that I can remember, because it's been quite a while, or none at least that stuck in my head. And I feel fortunate in that sense. And I'm not saying that this is what's true. I mean, many other women have much different experiences than I did. I think maybe also a difference for me is that I never was in one place for very long. So I was chairperson of our Democratic Party here in Florida, where I live, in the area where I live in Florida, for 2 years. And then I worked in Atlanta, Georgia, in technology when I lived there for about 2 years. So I think I was able to kind of move along before things started maybe happening that happens to other women. I know this is not a very a great answer to help women, but I do want to say one thing else, Leah. You mentioned about opportunity, is that I firmly believe, this kind of goes back to the fork in the road and going down one path versus the other, that there is no dead end. Something may seem like a dead end. Maybe you don't get the promotion that you really wanted to, or you apply for that dream job and it doesn't come to pass. But I can see all of these twists and turns that I've taken in my career has been because I saw an opportunity that was really appealing to me at the time. So for those of you watching and listening, is think about what is something that's just on the horizon that is not, it doesn't have to be perfect for you, but it's a great fit for you, your energy, what you love, what you want to do, something that's a little bit on that edge of that path. Where can you go down that? Like, see that opportunity. It's funny because I love history, but yet I'm also can see how history relates to the future. And seeing like, okay, that this is the future just maybe 5 steps away, go in that direction and go after that opportunity. And then if it doesn't work, you can always twist to another pathway.
There is so much conviction in the way you speak, Carol. I mean, clearly that's who you are and what you do, you know, and this is where often, you know, the work I do with women is to help them separate themselves from their work, because their work becomes their whole identity. And without work, who are we? And I'm just seeing just a amazing integration of, you know, what is important to you and what you believe in, and then how you are, how you're expressing this through, you know, through how you communicate. And then, but also, I love what you said. I turned up as Carol, not as a woman. So that tells me that you have a very deep sense of identity around who Carol is. And that's my sweet spot, is doing the deep identity work with people. I love it and that's what you demonstrate so beautifully, is how you are showing up right here is how someone is when they are deeply connected with who they are, and what they do is truly an expression of who they are. And I see that in the women that you work with as well. So that is, you know, such a testimony to, you know, we hear it bandied around all the time, you know, when you find your passion and you are doing the ikigai diagram, you know, when you're doing something you love, something that people need, something that people will pay for, and that you are good at. And I've heard this through and through everything you've shared so far. And that this is when you are truly living and leading in your power.
That's beautiful, Leah. And I'm so glad to hear that you do this work with your clients around identity and really getting them solid around who they are and how they want to show up in the world.
Because, you know, when you say you've been a feminist, you know, from being a teenager, but you didn't turn up in those male environments as a woman, you turned up as yourself. I'd like to sort of hear a little bit more about your thinking around that, or your philosophy around that, or, you know, was that something you learned? Or I'm very curious, because it's powerful.
It's a great question, Leah, and I don't have a kind of like boxed up answer for you. This is something that I would have to kind of talk out loud and think about. I think it's just that obviously I do have a very strong sense of myself and who I am and what I like and how I want to show up. And I feel like I studied women's history and gender studies in college and then graduate school. So I learned a lot about feminist theory. I learned a lot about women's stories in history, which we still don't hear enough about. So I had those role models. They were historical role models, a lot of them. So I had those role models growing up, like Nancy Drew, with these detective books that I read when I was young. And she was this detective, and she was a young woman. And I really loved that she was independent and going out into the world and discovering things. And so I think it was just a matter of, even though I did all this women's history and gender studies, I was still confident enough in myself that I was just still going to show up as Carol. And I think that's what I would love for the listeners and the watchers to think about, like, show up as Susan, show up as Jane, show up as Joy, whoever you are, show up as yourself, because that's what we want. That is everything. Like, you described me as multi-passionate and multifaceted at the beginning, but we all are like that. Most of us just don't have one thing that we do or one thing that we love to do. So bring all of yourself. And I like to think of projects. Like you said, don't get too attached to your job or the role that you have at your job. Think of what you're doing as a project. And some projects last a year or two, some projects last 5 or 10 years. And it's okay for that one project to end and another project to begin. And it's okay to have a gap in between those projects. Because I had a couple year gap in between my last technology company and starting Speaking Your Brand. So it's okay to have those fallow periods.
That's very pertinent to particularly women in research and in tech roles, and where the world of work is going. It's going, the corporate landscape is crumbling, and I think here in Australia, something like 93% or more of our revenue is actually from small businesses. So and so the growth of entrepreneurship and small business is by nature it's more lumpy revenue. It's more project based, and increasingly we're we're having to be so much more specialist, and the clarity required to stand out, you know, above the noise is so important. So, you know, this is where I'm seeing, yes, we've got to harness everything that we can, that is within our control. So what about things outside our control, Carol? Like, and this is also what I do see as a theme, particularly in the US. Women that I've interviewed that have come from the tech backgrounds, are in tech environments and forging, you know, their vision in the world. You know, there's an innate drive there that's driving them, and then there's a lot of systemic barriers still. You know, if there was one, you know, if there was one thing, one hinge that that would swing the biggest door, that would change things systemically, what do you think that might be?
So I have two answers for one is for the women themselves to think about, and then the other is for the company, the leadership to think about. So for the company leadership, is that if they want to have a more inclusive culture, if they want to attract more women and women of color into their jobs and retain them, they have to make it their number one priority. And I don't mean number one in HR, number one for their diversity person. I mean number one priority for the entire company, more so than their next marketing campaign and their advertising campaign and their sales that you're generating. They have to make it their number one priority. And it can be scary because they think, well, what about our marketing and our sales? But that diversity inclusion is going to attract the talent and retain them, that is going to then spill over into your marketing and sales and operations. So I think that most companies have it backwards. They don't put the order in correctly. Now, for the women themselves, because if the women are not in the C-suite, they're not in those executive leadership positions, it can be scary to kind of poke your head out and say something on your own, because understandably, you're worried about your job, what your supervisor will think, potential future promotions. So I would recommend get a group of you together, a group of women, say 5 or 6, and do an initiative on your own. You don't even have to tell anyone about it. Do a book club, do some type of, find a cause that you can start rallying around and start doing that work. Eventually, people will start noticing that you're doing this. And it will probably be related to diversity, inclusion, women in STEM, something related to that. People will start noticing, and then they're going to want to get on board, because people want to join things that are moving along, that are making progress. So don't go ask for permission. I'm the type of person where go and do something first, and then you can talk about it later. And don't go ask for permission because you don't want them to say no. Do something good and worthwhile. People will start noticing, and then that will open up a conversation.
Yes, that idea of something that's moving along, that is moving forward. Like, how do we create momentum? Momentum is such a magical word. That's a huge topic on its own, isn't it? But, you know, we have to start. And again, what I'm hearing is the power of the collective, of the collaboration. And women, we are so, again, a generalization, but a lot of women are good at collaboration. There's also a lot of tall poppy though, Carol, you know, where women are not supporting each other. There's a scarcity mentality, you know, and again, around how many seats at the table. Oh, well, no, I can't support you because I want that seat. So that has to be squashed. So I guess the thing is that we've got to find women also who will collaborate. And then maybe the ones who are not so keen on collaboration will be dragged along or just overtaken, right? Because there's more power in the collective, isn't there?
Yes, you know? And instead of fighting for that 1 seat or 2 seats at that table, make your own table. Make your own initiative, do your own project, create your own women's summit at your organization. You're building that table and you're filling it with the seats.
What a fabulous idea. I mean, and this is the thing that and it reminds me also, you know, of which, you know, whether you're climbing the corporate ladder or you're forging your own way as an entrepreneur and a business owner, in a way, you know, our career is our responsibility. And if that door is shut, or that table is full, you know, it's either, you know, have I got my ladder up against the right wall, right? So one way to test that would be, can I build something else within the environment I'm in and create my own table, create, you know, my own culture? And that, you know, if that doesn't happen, and you can't find a way to be able to bring your full self to the role and to the environment, then that can be a great way to be making a decision whether that environment is right for you or not. Because yes. I guess, you know, another point you pulled out is the fear of losing our job, the fear of speaking up against the norm. And that is huge. That is huge. And so what would be, you know, some of your tips and strategies around overcoming those fears?
Well, having that support system of other women around you who are with you, they support you, they're doing it as well. So you don't feel like you're just kind of on this island by yourself speaking up. So have that support system. The more you do it, the easier it really does get. People say that, and it's true. It's like working out. You work out your muscles and they get stronger, and it becomes easier to lift those weights. So the same thing that happens with speaking up. So maybe you don't start speaking up about the ultimate thing that you want to get to. Start smaller and work your way up to that big thing. And then the other thing is you also do have to be mindful of what is going to resonate within your organization that you're speaking about. And this goes back to the beginning of our conversation where we talked about understanding your audience and having that persuasive message for your audience. So figure out what are their hot button concerns. What is going to drive the needle for them? What is it that they want out of whatever this discussion or conversation you're going to have? Put it into their terms so that they don't get defensive and that they can see what's in it for them, and then start approaching it that way. You can try that. So I like to say that there's different types of thought leaders, different types of speakers. They're the ones who like scream from the rooftops, the house is on fire, we have to do something now. Like those are the urgent red alarm people. So sometimes that is necessary. Sometimes it's more of the, okay, there's things that are going on. We need to start working towards this incrementally. Those are the incremental people. They are the preach to the choir validators. So their message is to the choir that says, you're doing a great job. Continue what we're doing. People are hearing you sing. We're going to keep down this road. And then there are the listeners, and they're the ones kind of observing and picking up information. So you may be attracted to one of these roles versus another. There's also a certain time that these roles come into play. So you also have to judge the audience, the message, and what type of role is appropriate for that time.
Yeah, that's I haven't heard those descriptors before. Yes, the listener, the sort of the mediator, or the calming kind of, let's just, you know, just hold it together approach, or the one that's, the disruptor. Yeah. And you're right. And there are times and there are places and there are ways to do all that. And what I'm hearing is how vital it is how we communicate at these different times. And we've got to be able to adapt and flex. And that is why, you know, the work you do in your workshops and programs, Carol, is so important. And I think increasingly important, and particularly in the STEM environment where, you know, again, we have that a lot of these women are technical experts and perhaps haven't had the training or the background in speaking and in having themselves be understood in ways that empowers them and gets their message across, so that they become the leader and thought leader they need to be, to then be able to speak up and be heard at the table, let alone get to the table. So yes, I think there's just so much more that we could dig into here, and you've opened up so many avenues for further exploration for me as well, and I'm sure for our audience too. So I guess just as we wrap up, Carol, I've really valued your time today. And I guess if you were to pinpoint, I guess, three traits that you would say are absolutely like non-negotiable to hone as a woman, to become that woman of influence and thought leader and in their careers, what would that be?
So of those three traits, I would say resiliency is the first, because we will always have challenges. We will always have setbacks. And when we're trying things that are new, trying things that are outside of our comfort zone, but that's where your personal and professional growth comes from, is from pushing yourself beyond what you think is comfortable. So resiliency, knowing that you will come back from it. It's okay. You may have a couple down days or a week or so, but you will come back from it. The second trait is adaptability. And we talked quite a bit about this, about pivoting and finding those new opportunities as they present themselves. If you find yourself going down a road that is just not serving you anymore. So it's okay. So being adaptable and seeing what's on that horizon that could be beneficial to you and that you would enjoy and that you could have an impact doing. And then the third trait would be to challenge the status quo. So many of the women that we work with at Speaking Your Brand are the type of women where they want to challenge the status quo because they know that the status quo really only serves a very small percentage of people that it was built for and built by. And we're recognizing now that that system does not serve most of us. And so we're willing to challenge the status quo to say that this is going to be better for everyone if we start making these changes now.
Challenge the status quo. And that means we've got to take some action, talking about it and doing some stuff about it is what I'm hearing.
Yes.
Fabulous. So adaptability, resiliency, and challenging the status quo. So in terms of if people would like to connect with you, learn more about Speaking Your Brand and how they can be improving their ability to have the impact that they want, what's the best, or where's the best way to connect with you, Carol?
So visit speakingyourbrand.com. That has a bunch of resources on there. There's our podcast, Speaking Your Brand podcast, which you can find in your favorite podcast app, or you can listen to it on the Speaking Your Brand website, 185 episodes and counting. So there's a lot of different types of content on there. We also have free webinars that we do periodically on the Speaking Your Brand website. There's a link to past webinars that we've done, so that will help. And then you can also sign up to register for upcoming webinars. And I also would love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. That is a social media platform that I use the most. And again, if you go to speakingyourbrand.com, there's a LinkedIn icon that you can click to find me there and connect with me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you again so much for your time today, Carol. And there's just so much gold in what you've shared. And I can highly recommend your podcast and webinars. You are so generous with your knowledge and your passion to help all of us to crack that status quo and create a better world for the girls and the women coming up after us. So thank you for all you do, Carol. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Leah, and thank you for all the work that you do and for the series that you're doing.